Chris Beaven from the Repository.
And I'm Todd Porter with the Repository.
Welcome to Friday Night Ohio's Stark County edition of From the Pressbox, where we talk about the teams and players and coaches of Stark County football. We're here every Tuesday around noon on FN Ohio, and Wednesdays you can also look forward to our Tuscarawas County edition every Wednesday about noon. This week we're going to talk about some of the top games. Glen Oak and Boardman, McKinley and Hoover are the two biggest ones on the radar. We'll also talk about some teams that are on the bubble for the playoffs and look at Coach of the Year candidates. Let's start off with those top games, and the one that I think a lot of people will be seeing will be that Boardman at Glen Oak game, Todd.
Chris, I think that's a very important game for both Boardman and Glen Oak. Glen Oak's got to continue to impress upon people that they're not the Glen Oak of old, that they can get past the loss, a heartbreaking loss to McKinley. They can go out the lake and they can win a fairly tough game out there. Now they're feeling pretty good about themselves. We're going into week 8 of the season, so whether or not they're still the same team in week 8 as they were in week 1, which is a tough, hard-nosed team that's been able to take things week by week, that remains to be seen.
And that's what he's been stressing with the program, Coach Garcia, getting that mental and physical toughness, which I think you saw in the bounce back. And looking on the other side of the ball, I think Boardman is looking for that bounce back now. They've lost a couple in the league. They it rolled over people the first 5 weeks, so they're looking to get it back. They're tough up front with Corey Lindsley and JT Moore, and they're going to have their hands full, those two big guys up front.
You mentioned Lindsley and Moore. Lindsley is a offensive lineman, big offensive lineman, 6'4", 275-pounder, already committed to Ohio State. JT Moore's on the defensive end of the side. Side of the ball at defensive end. He's committed to Ohio State for 2010. Glen Oak is certainly going to have their hands full, and it will be a very interesting matchup to watch Aaron Williams, Glen Oak's two-way offensive and defensive linemen, go up against Corey Lindsley.
Speaking of great matchups, the McKinley-Hoover game that's going to be at Fawcett Stadium, you got two quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, first-year starters at their schools that are really turning it on, and that's Kyle Orzansky and Brett Tuladzitsky.
You know what? I got to see a lot of Kyle Orzansky last week against Perry, and what really impressed me about Kyle Orzansky last week, he stood in the pocket and he was under some duress and some pressure from Perry's defensive front. Orzansky stood there, took the hits, and delivered passes. He delivered nice long touchdown passes. One was called back because of a holding call, but he stood in there and he took the hit. And what I like about McKinley's offensive line, Chuck Lennon and Dakota Mikowski, two of the offensive linemen, that offensive line is starting to come together. They're not playing great right now, but they're playing much better than they did in week 1. They're starting to understand those spread concepts and that zone blocking scheme that they're going to this year.
Well, they're not thinking anymore. They're reacting and they're making plays. And as Coach Johnson has talked about, once you're able to get that out of your way, you're able to play much more aggressive when you're not thinking about where you're supposed to be. And it began when they got that running game going with Monterey Williams and Bryce Wilder. Those two guys kind of, I think, took pressure off everybody else. You're seeing everybody else settle in.
Yeah, and North Canton Hoover is going to have a tough time because we've talked a lot about McKinley's offensive side of the ball. We haven't even mentioned the best side of the football for them yet, and that's on defense. Eric Howard is going to have to carry the load for North Canton, and that's going to be tough sledding on Friday night against that defense. When you're talking about a guy like Steve Miller, defensive end, who's only a sophomore, rangy, fast, he's strong. He's getting looks from Ohio State. Jawan Snow at linebacker. I mean, those kids, they're going to bring the wood every single play, and that is the best side of the ball for McKinley.
Looking at the playoff picture and bubble teams, and kind of interesting our thoughts on who's on the bubble and who's not. Mentioning Hoover, let's stay with that thought, Todd. You put them on the bubble even though they're the 5th seed because of what they have coming up down the road.
You're talking about a North Canton team at 6-1 right now, in 5th place in Division I Region 2. They have McKinley 5-2. They have Glen Oak 6-1, and then they're going to have the rivalry game against Jackson at 4-3. And Jackson, they're fighting for their playoff lives too. Jackson is not completely out of this thing either. They're in 11th place in Region 11, so they're right there.
Jackson's another team firmly on the bubble with Lake, Perry, and then the game with Hoover. There's some points to be had. Obviously, Lake and Perry are struggling. Those are games they've got to get, and then they got to hope that Hoover gives them points at the end. Perry also kind of on the fringe there with Fitch, Jackson, and Glen Oak. Those are 3 games where they can get a healthy amount of points. So in the Federal League, you're looking at pretty much every game having some type of meaning in the picture. Also in Division I, I don't think people should forget about Massillon yet.
No, Massillon's got a pretty tough schedule in front of them. They got Harding, Mentor, and McKinley. 3 teams who are playing as good as anybody else in that region right now. Perry, I'm going to disagree with you. Perry's out of it. I mean, Perry's got 6 or 7 guys, starters, who were not dressed last week because they're hurt.
Right.
I mean, they're going to need a full boat to go against Fitch, Jackson, and Glen Oak.
They need a big upset if they're going to get in there.
They're going to have to pull off. They're going to have to win all 3 of those games, and they're going to have to, it'd be a huge upset if they beat Glen Oak then in Week 10.
looking at some of the lower divisions, there's a lot of teams hanging around down there hoping to see if they can make some noise late.
Well, I like Alliance in Division II, Region 7. They're, fifth place right now. They have a tough road ahead of them still. They have Canton South, Minerva, and Northwest. And here's the thing about Alliance. Of the 6 wins that they have, only 2 of them came against teams winning records. I'm not convinced Alliance is going to be a playoff team. If I'm going to be from Missouri on Alliance, they're going to have to show me that they belong in the playoffs here. Canton South, Minerva, Northwest. All 3 of those teams have winning records, and Northwest has 1 loss.
Let's talk about Coaches of the Year, and you mentioned Alliance. Obviously, Ron Kuzieski's done a great job there. I don't think many people thought the Aviators would be sitting with 1 loss this season. Also, in the lower divisions, you got Nate Held at Tuslaw. The Mustangs undefeated heading into a big game with Manchester. I think he also deserves some merit, but I know you have a guy that you really think should be looked at for Coach of the Year, Todd.
Yeah, I like the job that Scott Garcia has done at Glen Oak. They've come a long way this year. I mean, they had the tough loss to McKinley we talked about earlier. They've come back, they bounced back, they beat Lake. He's got a big injury to Drew Ayers. I mean, one of the best players in the county, bar none. Drew Ayers has had a shoulder problem off and on all the way back to August, keeps popping out of place on him. They've replaced him with Andrew Garman and Collins Daniels Mitchell and Eric Osborne. He's got a great quarterback in Brandon Martin that they rely a lot on third down on to make plays for them. I just like the job. It's almost like you can see the transition happening at Glen Oak from maybe not as tough-minded as you would like them to have been to being that tough-minded team now.
And what's going to make it tough is even the Coach of the Year in the Federal League, Ron Johnson, new coach at McKinley, 5 straight wins. Don Hertler's doing a great job. I don't think anybody thought the Vikings would have a chance to go 9-1 with all they lost. So I think those 2 guys are in the discussion, obviously. And then I think a guy we're looking county-wide that we're missing, Todd, is probably Paul Farrer. There's nothing harder to do than win with expectations.
Right, and they're winning with great expectations this year, and they're doing it in a phenomenal, impressive fashion every week. You don't see a letdown from them, and that's very difficult to do. When you have that much talent, it's very difficult to take every team on your schedule as seriously as Louisville has done this season.
We'll have 3 more weeks to sort all this out, and you can come back to FN Ohio every Tuesday around noon to see what we're talking about as far as the top teams, top games, and top players in Stark County football. If you have any questions or comments that you want to make, go to the Contact Us page on FridayNightOhio.com and shoot us an email, and we'll see what we can discuss in future weeks that might interest you. For The Repository, I am Chris Beaven.
And I'm Todd Porter. We'll see you next week from the Pressbox.